Some interesting footage has come in from Moscow today, which tells us quite a lot about the Ukraine war and also about the nature of warfare in general. What we've seen is this dramatic footage of an attack on the refineries around Moscow. In this case, something hitting a tank. And it's clearly a storage tank. It's with other storage tanks, and the whole roof comes off and collapses. That shows you that it's full of fumes, whatever they were, oil fumes, petrol fumes, gas fumes, whatever. We're not interested in this contrail. This is from something quite low down, but whatever that was fired several seconds before, because the contrail is wavy, it's dispersing. That's something that's already gone. We're interested in this other contrail. Look at that. That contrail is narrow, it's concentrated, it's just been fired, and it's on its way from a low position somewhere on the ground on a very low trajectory. Let's just follow it through, and there it goes straight into where the tank is. It's just possible, of course, that something else might have caused that explosion at that particular moment, but it doesn't seem likely. From all the evidence we can gather, we can't be certain, but it seems as if the Russians using their own man-pads, these man-portable air defense systems, shoulder-fired like stingers, it looks as if they've managed to blow the roof off one of their own storage tanks. Well, that's the sort of thing that happens in war, and Moscow has been under real threat in the last few days. The Ukrainians have attacked Moscow on 3 successive days, and they've done a fair bit of damage. They've overwhelmed Moscow's defense system, and they've caused a lot of upset and outrage in Moscow. One of the reasons for that is that they've been going for the oil storage facilities and the refineries. In particular, the Kropotnya refinery here, very big refinery. And the Kropotnya refinery accounts for 40% of all of Moscow's fuel needs, its total fuel needs. And that refinery, by burning, has put fuel into the air, it's put clouds of dirty smoke into the air, it's put a black rain on everything, and most importantly, these attacks on the refining capacity have caused the Russians real problem over their petrol supplies. In the occupied territories, in Crimea and in the Donbass, the supply of petrol has been rationed now for a month. But this week, the Russians have extended that rationing to the whole country. So they're having trouble actually creating enough petrol for their own domestic market. And the point is, petrol rationing is always very unpopular with the population. So the Russians wouldn't do it unless they had to. Why aren't the Russians actually defending themselves better against these Ukrainian drones? Why are so many getting through? Well, the answers are reasonably simple. The Russians are not doing what the Ukrainians have been doing now for a couple of years. They're not using an acoustic system all the way along their border, which hears the drone as well as tries to spot it on radar. They're not using air-to-air systems where drones go against other drones to actually bring them down while they're still somewhere away from the targets. They're not using mobile fire teams to move around quickly to where the drone attack is heaviest. And they're not using ground-based machine guns and things like the Gepard system, the German system, which are very effective to bring down drones. They're not doing any of those things. The Russians have been very slow to this. They're using their radar-based S-300s, S-400s, their anti-missile systems, and they're very flat-footed. And so the drones flying low in great numbers are able to dodge around these old systems which the Russians are using, even around Moscow, which is the most heavily defended part of the whole country. Drones are still getting through. There's a real lesson for the Russians there, which they are beginning to learn. The drones that make the difference for Ukraine are from the Firepoint firm, very innovative company. The Firepoint 1 is a long-range drone. This is one of them. It doesn't carry a huge warhead, but it travels about 1,600 kilometers, so it goes a very long way. The FP5, the Flamingo drone, it's not actually a drone, as you can see, it's a missile, it's a cruise missile, a bit like the old V1 in the Second World War. And the point about the Flamingo is that it travels long distances and it's got a very heavy warhead. It does real damage to anything that it hits. And those 2 drones in particular, there are others, but those 2 in particular seem to have had a pretty big effect on taking this air war towards the Russians. Of course, drones matter in the scheme of things. In Lebanon, Hezbollah have been using drones very effectively against the Israeli Defense Forces, and the IDF have had real problems dealing with that. And of course, the Iranians have used drones from the beginning to hold off the Americans, and they're using drones now to keep the Strait of Hormuz as a pressure point as they negotiate with the Americans over a bigger ceasefire. But it isn't only that. Wars that we don't say very much about, in Africa, for instance, are dominated by drones. In all of these sort of countries, Mali, Sudan, Somalia, Mozambique, Democratic Republic of Congo, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, you can see drones being used all the time to greater and greater effect. Because what drones do is that they allow the weak to hold off the strong. They negate the advantages of high-tech weapon systems, and they prolong conflicts. They keep conflicts going longer than they would otherwise last because they allow the weak to hold on. And that tells us something about the changes in the nature of warfare. You know, the basic nature of warfare doesn't change much over the centuries, but the ways in which it is fought are changing all the time with technology, with economic change, with political changes in general. And so when we think about drones, they are the robotics of the modern age. And at the moment, the drones are the kings of the battlefield, and the princes of the battlefield are those manufacturing organizations which can produce lots of cheap mass drones. That's where it is.